And I don't like to end without just purely my voice. One of our great supporters in the team in all the work that we've done, and she was kind enough to write the foreword for this book, is Dame Paulette Louisi. And she's the head of state, the Governor General of the small state of St. Lucia in the Caribbean. She's been part of our team all the way through. She's a former doctoral student of mine, so that's a nice bonus. You know, I do have at least one head of state who studied with me. And she speaks exceptionally well, and she's invited to do keynote addresses the world over. Now, here are some words that Dame Paulette used. She's still working with us now. I'm paraphrasing here with these bullet points. The first bullet point, that's Paulette speaking. The international development community can learn a lot from the experience of small states. And as a head of state, she feels passionate that the voices of small states in the international arenas that she's invited to all the time, very often there's a different agenda on the table. And she's saying, how does that fit St. Lucia? You know, and hold on, St. Lucia's got some experience. We can influence the international agenda. So here's a direct quote, the second bullet point. While small states must continue to seek external assistance, you know, we don't have the big resources and so on, she's saying. We need help, we need partners, we need collaborators to implement their development strategies. They, small states, they know what their own needs are and what their priorities should be. So they have much to contribute to the international discourse and deliberations worldwide. And if we're moving into a new era now, post-2015 development planning, again, just reflect from your own perspective here, national perspective, would you want your voice to be heard more strongly in the beyond 2015 development priorities? Those goals are going to be set. You know, in a year's time, the newspapers will be full of it. Global goals re-established, here's a list of 6 of them. But I'm hoping that you could be looking at them and think, well, they are more flexible this time. We can see how our goals can be slotted in. Because that would mean that we would be able to see how our goals, whether it's St. Lucia or Maldives, how the goals of those education systems could be supported by partnerships with the international community. Not the support will come, but you've got to do something else. Do what you prioritize in your ministry, and the international support will be there. I'm hoping, and that's what we've been working towards, and that's why we've been feeding this research into global development goal consultations as well, to argue for more context sensitivity, to more flexible global development goals for the future that would include, obviously, things like tertiary education, higher education in a small state setting, and to try to make the voice of small states more visible in that future world in which we'll all be living. And I think I'd rather just end with, on this next slide here, this is the last slide, there's a whole set of recent resources. So if you are a researcher, you know, or you're a policy analyst and you need to look at some of the recent stuff, the slides have. But I'd rather just go back and leave Dame Paulette's voice, you know, in your ears as I conclude. Thank you.
I think in my experience from tertiary education, grade 11, 12, and this may not be directly related, but I think there's a connection with the difference of graduates or the passing grades of girls and boys.
Okay.
And what I think that I noticed is maybe in subjects where there's more to by heart in and learning that girls excess boys. But sometimes if it is theoretical or that you have to think and apply, maybe sometimes the boys excel.
Yes.
And that is something I noticed personally, which may not be the fact,
Yeah.
but I think from my time of studying, I have noticed that. And personally, maybe I'm not speaking for the boys, but I personally do not like by hearting, and therefore I tend to not do well in such subjects.
Well, thank you for that reflection and comment. Yeah. Um, and maybe that's what you will do in the future, that you might find you want to research that issue. We might be uncovering these patterns, but we need other people to do more research to understand why that is happening. Why are boys and girls performing differently? And even your answer is helping a little bit there. So maybe that's a seeds to some future assignment you might write, or a research project or something. And I think I did learn today, that the majority of people enrolled in this university might be girls. Most staff too. Now, what does that tell us? Yeah.
I think Dr. Hassan has a question, a comment, or...
I want to say something about what my friend just said. I actually came to know Mark Bray from his work with Chinese students'
Yes.
academic achievement.
Yeah.
That was much earlier, before I think he worked on these aspects
Yes.
recently. His question was this, his research question was this: Chinese students are well known for rote learning, and as he says, just being a bookworm. But why are they topping up at all the honors lists or in the best universities of the world?
Yeah.
And his answer was this, after much research, that there are two levels of rote learning, the surface level and a deeper level. And once actually you learn something even by rote, after a number of times what happens is actually the deeper meaning settles in, and that's why the students do well. So rote learning is not as bad, according to Professor Bray, that it is meant to be. It is talked about. I just want to say something about what is command. My question to you is, we also have now this problem of actually number of students graduating with higher, the number of students graduating with better marks being female. What is actually what are the steps taken by the Caribbean? Because you referred to a study that they are done there 20 years back. To ameliorate, to correct this situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's two good questions there. Let me just touch on the first bit, the observation bit about rote learning. Remember, much of my own argument here has been context matters. Beware of models that are exported. There's another phrase that's used, I hate this phrase, rolled out, as if it will be rolled out all over the world because it's the best practice. I think you could look at the debate about pedagogic style, teaching and learning styles, and say the Western world has for a long time been rolling out rather unchallenged assumptions set by people like Mark Bray that child-centered and student-centered pedagogies are inherently better. Now, I don't want to sort of undermine much good work that's done in that arena, but there is also evidence that suggests that the combinations of learning styles may be very appropriate, and there are different contexts and places and so on where that can be very productive as well. So all I'm saying there is a challenge, and a challenge that is a deserved challenge, to the assumption that one type of pedagogy is definitely the best for everyone, everywhere, all the time. Mark Bray's analysis and other Chinese scholars' analysis do say that yes, you would still have the deep learning, you could still have the student-centered learning, but the rote traditions and histories, and you've already said it, Vice-Chancellor, can be there as a foundation. So it could be a combination that might be best in those. So that's the first thing on that. But it fits into my critique. Beware of just one model being seen as the best everywhere, best practice. I think it may well be the best practice, but make that question first before you decide it. And then the second question is, well, it's more about what can we do? What can we learn from the experience or the Caribbean experience? Errol Miller's book, 20 or more years ago, he was defining the problem. He wasn't exactly coming up with the answers at that point in time. And I think what I would say is that not many people really have done enough research to come up with strong answers in terms of boys and learning. But the evidence that's coming from the Caribbean suggests it might be the things outside the school. It's the pressures in Caribbean communities to find a job, to move from the home village, and the boys get into that more than the girls who would stay more rooted. It's other pressures that are in their social lives. I'm afraid, some of the stories, bad news stories about drugs in the Caribbean. And boys seeing, well, I can get the golden necklace, I can get the bling, I can do all of that really quickly without having to spend ages studying through that, sleepy university. Comparative research, my field, is very, very strong on saying if you want to understand education, let's say this is education, look outside of education to understand what's happening in there. Look at the history, the culture, the traditions. In the Chinese context, you'll be looking at Confucian traditions. Respect for educators, respect for education itself. In the Caribbean, we'll be looking outside of the box of the gender issue to realize that the pressures on boys and the way boys are making their identity in that Caribbean community is something that's not quite so easily compatible with being the good student. The seeds are there, but I think researchers need to start looking at what those small states have actually been doing, what they've experienced.
Thank you very much for the excellent research you have just presented. I just wondered, since your research findings on small states, I just wondered if there has been any major transformation in the large Commonwealth states. We still have a lot of universities in the developed world has students from the small states in the developing countries. I just wondered, the education system, the higher education system has been responding to your findings from this small state research.
Okay. I do work in other states other than small states. I've got a long-running research partnership with colleagues in Kenya, in East Africa. In Tanzania, I have a project with some of my other colleagues at Bristol. So I go beyond the small states. That's in the low-income countries of the world, if you want to think of it that way. But I also then have very close working contacts within the UK system, within the States, within Australia, actually, where we have common histories as well in terms of our biographies. I think at this stage, this particular study, this book was only published at the end of 2011, so it's 2 years at the maximum old in terms of seeing an impact elsewhere globally. The impact of our research has certainly been demonstrated in terms of shifting priorities in bodies like UNESCO and the Commonwealth. In 2009, your Vice-Chancellor and I, we were both at a UNESCO Policy Forum, very high-level event in Paris at UNESCO headquarters, basically. And they were prioritizing more support and more work, more research, more development activities on tertiary education in small states. Tertiary education in small... that was quite a label, a shock to the system internationally. So we know that our research has had an impact, a real impact, upon international agencies, work plans of the Commonwealth, and other such directions. But to be able to trace it through and have evidence that it's changing strategies in terms of tertiary education and development elsewhere, we don't have any hard evidence. But in a way, the global community certainly are reflecting the things we're saying, Quality is the agenda now on the global education for all agenda. 10 years ago, it was access, access, access. You know, how many places have you got? It took a while for the penny to drop, for the international community to realize what the small states have been saying for a long time. What's the point of very poor quality primary education if the kids come out of that level, that sector, and they don't have literacy skills, numeracy skills, technology skills? We've just spent our money and it's wasted. It's only good investment, following the logic of education for all, if it's quality primary, quality basic education. Now, all I'm saying is the global agendas have changed, they've shifted, they take those priorities that are definitely visible in this research. We can't say that this changed it. But I think we've got enough reinforcement to say that there's a lot of the analysis here that is pretty robust and others can learn from. And you don't just have to be in a small state to learn from it.
Good evening. Thank you very much for very interesting research you have done. And then one of the major concerns that often small states have is the very often banks and other donor agencies require to show economies of scale, which
Yes.
we do not have.
Yeah.
Often in situations like in Maldives, for example, if you look at the student-teacher ratio, you will not be able to get the economies of scale in that manner. But very often we are pressured by bank and other donor agencies to get into that stream and see how things go. What was the what does your research in this area show?
It's a very good question. Our research would be very consistent with the argument that the context matters more than many people realize, and that means international agencies too. So our research, we've got all sorts of different types of case studies. I neglected to say there are case studies of good practice. I didn't say best practice. I didn't mean to say, we all must copy that. But there are case studies of good practice in small states throughout the Commonwealth in there. That you can even see them. They're the boxes. They're little practical examples of things that others can learn from. So we've got many things in here saying, stick to your guns. Don't be too intimidated by the banks and the lending agencies. Yes, you've got to listen to their research. Yes, you've got, maybe it's multi-grade teaching. Or maybe it's having schools in the morning and the afternoon and using the same premises. Or maybe it's a policy that says bring people from small atolls and put them in a bigger school. There could be all sorts of ways that the World Bank in particular might be saying, benefit from economies of scale and then we'll support you. But our research is saying if you've got local research that shows that it's a better investment here in Maldives to keep your small schools, to get high quality there, even though it seems more expensive on the face of it. But you need your research to be able to challenge them, don't you? So what we are saying is build up your research community, build up your evidence base, strengthen your argument, and then you're not quite at the mercy of those international agencies who say this is the model, this is what you should do. And we've enough evidence to say that very often that pays off in the end, better than following a model that didn't really fit. If you follow a model that doesn't really fit and it fails, all the investment's gone. Now, there's other strategies that we've got in here too. Tertiary education development. There's one very, very good case study, the Virtual University for the Small States of the Commonwealth. Its acronym is VUSC. Now, that's a body that's working with across all Commonwealth small states. It's a university that exists, but there's no place. It's there. It's a virtual university. But what it's saying is small states may have particular types of courses that they really need at the tertiary level. It could be disaster preparation for environmental threats. It could be something to do with fishing management or coral reef protection. Now, those courses exist in some small state universities. Take the coral reef stuff. There are places, specialist university places in the Pacific that are world-leading bodies. VUSC has created itself as an umbrella to say, contribute those courses to this virtual university, and we in the Commonwealth will help make them available through other tertiary institutions in small states and make them accessibly available at a good price, so they're not and at high quality. So there are ways that you can meet that's meeting economies of scale. Similarly, in the Caribbean, there have been textbook projects where the textbooks, you're not relying on textbooks that are coming from a publishing house only based in London that's European-based stuff. It doesn't have contextually sensitive material on the social sciences or whatever it might be. But they can be developed by Caribbean writers to serve the region. What is the University of the West Indies? It's a regional university. Economies of scale. Let's work together. Recognise where the small states they can. What is the University of the South Pacific? It's the same. What have we got in the Indian Ocean? Well, we do. You have developments here, but there is no the same length of the tradition of a regional university is not here as it is in the Pacific and the Caribbean. They're the two big models, but that's economies of scale too. But Dame Paulette Louisi, she is in St. Lucia. She supports the regional university of the West Indies, but she's been a very strong critic saying, even so, our own regional university doesn't meet St. Lucian needs as well as it should at the tertiary level. And that's why she believes they need their own National University of St. Lucia. And they're probably 2 or 3 years behind you here in moving from a university college. And it was the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. That's what it still is labelled. It brought together the teacher education, the health education, just as you did here, into one tertiary body that was the premier tertiary. And that's the case in St. Lucia. They're ready to trying to make the step to call it a university. But she believes that that can be compatible with a regional university. You've just got to work together to decide, what do you guys specialise in, what do we do, and that way we can meet our local needs better.
Thank you for the research and presentation. I spent some time in the Caribbean and I can resonate what I found from there. In the markets you have ladies selling fish and so on. Even in the local markets there will be lots of ladies. Construction work is done by lots of ladies and so on. So I can actually connect the difference and see that though we are islanders, there are lots of differences in that respect. So it was very helpful for me to connect it. Thank you.
Thank you for that observation. It's an observation that lets me conclude, if time is now wrapping up, and I could give a wrapping up sort of comment. One of the reasons I chose to, when you are appointed as a professor, you can say exactly what the title is that you want to be. I could have been Professor of Education or Professor of Educational Management in Education, but it was Comparative and International that I wanted as the label, because that's the sort of work I do. But why do I do that sort of work? I think it is that experience of somewhere else. It's a strange one, it's a little twist. It's all in the comparative literature. Comparative studies help you understand your own place better. It's not so much as it helps you understand the other places you've studied. It does that, it's obvious. But the biggest benefit, you understand your own, yourself, your own culture, your own education system, and therefore you can make a stronger, better contribution to your own system by doing that comparative study. And I think that's echoed in what you're saying. You saw the differences, you saw some of the similarities, but by going to the Caribbean, you understand Maldives better. And there's a good reason to do the sort of research that we've been talking about today, and even a good reason to join in the education in small states research community. And I'd be delighted if we continue that relationship in different ways, and the work that we do in the future on education in small states involves more people in this room and in this country, and connecting with people in the Pacific and people in the Caribbean. And it's that interchange that is really so valuable, really. It's interesting, it's enjoyable. I mean, and maybe my last line is, it has been a pleasure to speak to you today, to tell you this sort of story. I'm always very careful. I don't want to be telling you stories about your own system when you are the experts, and I hope I haven't given that flavour. But what I'm saying is that the voices from small states elsewhere probably do connect with some of your feelings and your passions, and thank you for the hospitality and for the chance to speak here, and for everything you've done for the week while I've been here. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Professor Crossley, and I hope you've motivated some of us to do similar kind of studies. And before we conclude, I'd like to ask Dr. Ali Sharif to say a few words in conclusion.
It is indeed a great pleasure once again to have you with us for another very fruitful session here. I just want to say thank you all as well. We have very senior officials from the Ministry of Education. We have, in fact, we have the rector of the second biggest higher education institution in the country, Villa College, and also some of his colleagues. And very respectfully, let me thank you again, just in conclusion. It has been an overwhelming day for you as well as for us. And we are probably a little bit sleepy, but I think it's, 5:30 in the afternoon in the UK, but still, you are in the other part of the world, so it's too hard to keep your eyes open.
Thank you very much.
Indeed, we have learned a lot, even in this very short period of time you have spent with us, and we hope to do the same, continue. Learn from your experiences. Such a world authority on international and comparative education, and this link with the Maldives National University and the country is going to be beneficial for us for now as well as in the future. I do hope we keep the relationship growing, and that will benefit not us at the university here, and I believe it is going to be an invaluable contribution to the rest of the higher education institutions as well, and we will keep working together. Thank you very much, and assalamu alaikum, and have a very good evening. Thank you.